Welcome back. This morning we're talking about patience. Our next guest is a United Church of Christ minister. She leads national spiritual retreats and is the author of 7 Spiritual Gifts of Waiting. And she's here to talk to us about how having patience can be a spiritual teacher. Please welcome Holly Whitcomb.
Thank
So
you.
good to have you with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
Now, spiritually speaking, what does patience teach us?
Oh, patience teaches us a great deal. It's very countercultural because
Yes,
our
it is.
society would teach us that there has to be immediate gratification to everything we do. So patience is very countercultural. And I think patience most of all teaches us that there's no quick fix, that inevitably in life there just are some long hauls that we have to endure. There are very few quick fixes, and patience teaches us that we have to endure that, and most of all that we have opportunities to learn from that.
You talked about instant gratification. You know, we're in this world now where I want it now.
I want it now,
Is
absolutely.
patience a lost virtue?
Patience is getting to be a lost virtue, especially with all the commercializations of our society. There's always an instant fix to anything. There's a tonic you can take. There's a medicine that's going to happen immediately. And so we're not used to waiting. We want everything to happen right away. And patience teaches us to wait.
Okay, so we don't want to wait.
We don't want to wait.
You have some exercises to help us with that. For
Right.
those of us struggling with patience.
Mm-hmm.
Give us some examples of what
Well,
we could
at
do.
the end of my writing about patience, I have some spiritual questions such as, what are you waiting for now? What are you learning from patience right now in your life? What are the gifts of patience that this period of waiting is teaching you? Or what gems of wisdom would you give to a young person that you yourself have gleaned from patience?
And what are the answers to these questions? What does that do for one?
I think it helps a person to be introspective, to look at their lives and say, this period of waiting that I'm going through is redemptive. Waiting gets a bad rap in our society. We usually dread it. We look at it as something undesirable, but it's really sort of a treasure chest of all sorts of opportunities for growth. And if we look at it that way, we redeem it.
You, as a spiritual director, you use the season of Advent as an example of what real patience is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
I can. When we get to Advent, it's a season that will not be rushed. If you remember as a child, you may have had one of those little Advent calendars with all the little doors, and you don't swing those little doors open all at once. You take one per day, and you wait patiently and open one door per day. And in the liturgical season of Advent, we don't sing Christmas carols, we sing Advent carols. We don't light all of those 4 candles in the Advent wreath at once. We light one specifically every Sunday until Christmas comes. And we have to wait until all of those expectant scriptures have been read and until all the Advent carols have been sung. And then the Christ child is born.
And there are many stories from the Bible that are great examples, again, of waiting. And
There
patience.
are. And waiting is dominant in the Bible. We know that the Israelites plowed through the wilderness, the Bible story says, for 40 years. We know that Jesus was in the desert for 40 days being tempted. We know that Jacob, for example, waited to win the hand of Rachel for 14 years. Paul was in prison for months, probably years of his life, patiently waiting. So yes, the Bible has lots of stories about patience and about waiting.
So now we've talked about the Bible. What can someone watching today learn from your book or your exercises in regards to patience?
Patience teaches us a couple of things. Patience teaches us about the fullness of God's time. When we're mired in our little chapter on waiting, we feel that we're closed in and trapped. And the gift of patience teaches us that there is a larger perspective, that there's more to our decades of life than this one little chapter we're trapped in. And it teaches us the fullness of God's time and that there's a larger picture out there. Patience also teaches us to wait actively. Sometimes we do get impatient and we feel as if there's nothing we can do while we wait. And active waiting is such a good solution.
What is that? Active waiting.
We feel productive. For example, if you're recovering from a long illness, When you go home from the hospital, you're not going to sit there and wait for your healing. Some of that will happen on its own. But if you take your medicine properly, if you go to rehab faithfully and do your physical exercises, if you adhere to a good diet, all of this is part of active waiting and makes you feel as if you're doing something constructive. And then the waiting is much easier.
And you also say that patience allows us to be more connected to others. How's that?
Patience gives us the time to be available to others. For example, if you're waiting for a loved one in the intensive care unit, you may be sitting there and the hours are going by quite slowly. Let's say it gets to be 7 o'clock at night and you're hungry, and you notice another person is sitting across at a table across from you, and you say, you know, I'm going to go down to the cafeteria, I'm going to get a sandwich, a cup of coffee. Can I bring you something back? And patience gives us time to be available to other people.
Now, I know you have 2 children. I have a 4-year-old. Is it too early to start talking to her about patience?
Well, I think it's not too early, and it's not ever too early to say the culture is very different. And in order to act with patience, we have to be countercultural every day.
Well, thank you so much, Holly, for coming in. It sounds like patience forces us to be more connected to others in reality.
It does.
And that's not,
it always
and that's
happens,
not a
and
bad
it's a
thing,
good thing.
to be fully present.
Fully present.
Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome.
If you'd like to see how much patience you have, try one of Holly's exercises from her book, 7 Spiritual Gifts of Waiting, on our New Morning website at faithstreams.com.